The highly anticipated third Sonic movie released a few weeks ago to roaring box office success, and I mean that quite literally. The speedy blue hedgehog has been beating Mufasa over the head with a stick at the domestic box office, in a fight that even saw Disney themselves get community noted for misinformation.
Whoa!
Even outside of the box office, Sonic has been beating the mouse once more when it comes to both critical and fan reception, with Sonic 3 being labelled the best of the trilogy and a love letter to Sonic Adventure 2, and Mufasa being labelled relatively watchable at best. Today, I want to talk about how. What is it that Sonic 3 has over Mufasa to make it more successful? In my explanation, I'm going to have to divulge some spoilers for Sonic 3. The movie hasn't been released worldwide yet, so if you haven't seen it, please click away now. I really think the movie is something everyone should get to experience, free of as many spoilers as possible. First, I want to talk about the first two Sonic movies. This franchise has been on a massive journey cinematically. There was the obviously problematic start. It feels like pop culture infamy at this point. I mean, Disney themselves even ragged on Ugly Sonic in their Rescue Rangers movie.
This is the FBI! We've got you surrounded! Yeah! Ugly Sonic!
I genuinely have no idea what they were thinking, but still, the team worked hard to fix it and they created a design that fans were ultimately happier with. This willingness to actually hear and more importantly listen to what the fans want is something I'll bring up again later on. But besides that, I like to believe that this was our earliest indicator that these movies were made with love for the fans, and not just to be hollow adaptations designed to grab cash from the hands of fans of the video games. The first two movies were released to fairly middling but still positive reviews, the second being deemed a step forward, and while I've never met a Sonic fan that hasn't at the very least enjoyed the movies for what they offer, they have definitely been the centre of a lot of fan debates over the last few years. For example, Sonic's characterisation and the lack of music from the games have been two of the more prominent controversies. This is important when it comes to Sonic 3. Hype was at an all-time high going into this movie. Everything seemed to line up perfectly. The casting of Keanu Reeves as Shadow was a stroke of genius, and the movie's marketing nestled itself really well alongside the marketing for Year of Shadow and the success of SonicXShadowGenerations. It seemed like everybody I knew was aware and excited about the movie's release, and I can't say the same for Mufasa, though I am willing to admit there's an obvious bias towards Sonic in those that I surround myself with. In the midst of all the excitement though, I did still see some nerves. In particular, I remember when people were taking some of Sonic's admittedly rougher lines from the trailers and getting increasingly concerned about his characterization again.
Konnichiwa!
The general consensus was that in them changing his story so that he's a child in the movies, they made him too much like an annoying little kid with unfunny and cringe humour. Now the thing is, it'd be wrong to say that Sonic hasn't been cringe before, so it seems to be the movie's portrayal of that humour as coming from a place of less maturity and nonchalant composure than his video game counterpart that most take issue with. From my perspective, I'm on the fence. I think the change does make sense in context. This is a different Sonic, and these movies very much play with coming-of-age tropes and parental family dynamics, so it makes sense for him to be a less mature, younger hedgehog. That being said, I can also understand why some fans would be hesitant to keep the characterization that way, when it seems like the character they know and love Sonic to be is so close and yet also so far away. With Sonic 3, however, it becomes clear that these topics were actively being thought about behind the scenes, perhaps even the whole time. Almost everything here feels purposely designed in response to some of the criticisms from the first two. We open with a pitch-perfect, gritty, shocking dramatic prologue that fits Shadow's character and story so well. It becomes immediately obvious that tonally, Fowler isn't playing around anymore, and that is continuously maintained throughout Shadow's screen time in particular. The film recognizes that despite needing a few subtle changes to how they tell it, his story about loss, grief and choices is actually an important story for kids to see, and not something that should be shied away from. This opening scene in particular though blew me away with how vibrant and stylish everything felt. It's not a major gripe of mine, but I do think the first two Sonic movies have lacked flair, and ultimately, in particular with their use of colours and lighting, ended up feeling a little visually plain. I was initially worried during our first cut back home to Tom, Maddie and Team Sonic because it felt like all of a sudden that plainness of the first two seeped back into the frame. But the film student nerd in me was overjoyed when, as the movie and Sonic's arc progressed, the colours and visual style adjusted and progressed with it. It feels genius actually. You tie your change in how your films look along with the change of your protagonist to make it feel more gradual. This evolution becomes so incredibly noticeable when comparing the first race scene to the final one. The gang looks so much more colourful by the end, and the movie feels so much more alive because of it. The opening isn't just notable for its tone and style though, it's also important when discussing what fans of the series have long been asking for. It serves as the first time we see Maria in the movie, playing a rendition of Live and Learn on her acoustic guitar. Music from the games? In a Sonic movie? The continual use of Live and Learn as a motif for Shadow, and also that scene, feels like everything fans were asking for in the music department. But let's talk about that arc and change of Sonic in this movie though. It becomes clear in early scenes with Tom, and then also in scenes shared by Team Sonic, that despite Knuckles and Tails being fairly well-defined characters at this point, Sonic is actually struggling to figure out who he is. This prompts Tom to give him the classic lesson about how it's our choices that define us. But while a little cliche, it's used brilliantly in pairing with Shadow. "If I didn't have you, I'd probably be a totally different hedgehog," he says as the movie hard cuts to Shadow, and this idea that Sonic and Shadow are parallels of each other continues throughout the film, serving both arcs perfectly. When Sonic is put through similar emotional turmoil to Shadow, losing someone he loves deeply as he initially fears with Tom, he first mirrors his behaviour completely, seeking more power to exact his revenge and ultimately going super again to try and take it. This is where the movie really starts to shine. The battle between Super Sonic and Super Shadow is so fueled by rage that it feels as much an emotional one as a physical one, despite the visual spectacle happening on the screen. When the battle calms down, Sonic finally realizes who he is. Tom was right. We're defined by our choices, and Sonic isn't willing to make the wrong one. As distant sunlight shines over Sonic and Shadow on the moon, Shadow also realizes the same. He recounts a moment with Maria. The light shines even though the star is gone, and they mature together in this moment over their shared trait, their desire to do right by those they love, and also those they've lost. Important to mention here is that this foundation is also laid from the very beginning, when Sonic asks Tom, "Do you think Longclaw would be proud of me?" Sonic ends the movie a vastly maturer hedgehog. The writers brilliantly used the general storyline of Sonic Adventure 2 as not only a love letter adaptation, but also cleverly weaving it with Sonic's own arc to deliver the Sonic that people have long been asking for. This brings me to my point. While Sonic 3 is by no means perfect, and by no means pleasing everyone either, some of the humour and the way it distracts from the tone of everything else being another topic of controversy lately, it at the very least sets out intentionally, with every emotional beat, to bring itself closer to what the fans want. It's this idea that Disney have fundamentally misunderstood with Mufasa. Their live-action remakes have long been the centre of heated debates about whether or not they're at all necessary, or sometimes even worthy of audiences' time. While people haven't ever loved any of the remakes exactly, ticket sales are usually pretty reliable. I mean, Lion King 2019 made over 1.5 billion globally. It's easy to see where they've gone wrong here. They've made an assumption about why people were buying the tickets. They weren't buying them out of genuine interest to see a new Lion King, they were buying them to see the old one because of their connection to the original, which is why these films often get middling reviews because they fail to deliver the same experiences. Less people are buying tickets to see Mufasa because the demand just isn't there to see a Mufasa story, because there's no original to feel connected to here. It's a new story. It's odd really, but the franchise so famous for misunderstanding what fans are asking for is now listening more intently and purposefully to the demand than the biggest media company in the world is. It's almost as though when you have so much money and market capitalization that you never have to worry about anything, you start to see your audience more as consumers to take advantage of than people to be listened to. But that couldn't be true, could it? What makes it even funnier to me is when you zoom out a bit and realize that Sonic 3 is beating Disney by using its own trilogy formula against it. I mean, Sonic 1 is about a lonely teen struggling to get a grip on his powers and what he should use them for, and ultimately dreaming of becoming a hero. Then Sonic 2 is about beginning to understand when to work individually and when to work cooperatively while also being careful who you ally with. Finally, Sonic 3 uses fan favourite characters and material to weave a story wherein the protagonist loses a parental figure, prompting them to learn about making the right choices, and completing the character's arc to bring them closer to the version of themselves that fans have been asking for. Wait a minute, this seems familiar. All jokes aside, I love these Sonic movies, but the third one really speaks to me as a fan on another level. I loved just how much they lent into Shadow's identity issues, and it felt really timely with the video I just put out about him a few weeks ago. The movie was everything I hoped it would be and more, and the little Shadow fan in me feels well and truly serviced in the best way. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank everyone for their support lately. The love on my first video was well and truly felt, and I'm so happy that so many of you have reached out to talk about your own experiences. I truly hope this little channel of mine can be considered a safe space for us all to talk freely about these characters that we love so much. And I'm so thankful for all the support. Genuinely, I just hit 800 subscribers, and I know that might not feel like a big number to most, but it feels massive to me, and I'm so grateful. If you made it this far, I'd be super interested to know what your thoughts on Sonic 3 were, if you liked it, if you didn't, what your problems were, what you enjoyed, and if you're new here and you liked it, please consider subscribing. I'm working on a video about Tails at the moment that I'm really proud of, and I can't wait to share it with everyone.